Greetings. My name is Alan A.J. Holman Sr. I'm a graduate student of Liberty University in the History Department. I am now interviewing Dr. Ray Charles Evans on September 26, 2021. Dr. Evans is a retired educator from Flatonia, Texas, that sits between Houston and San Antonio. This interview is taking place via Zoom due to the COVID-19 restraints. We're going to talk about the field of education, his experience in 3 different states of which he worked, and how it progressed from the 1950s to today and its future. We're going to talk about his influence on young people who have been disenfranchised, those who have counted out as losers, but yet they have succeeded because of his profession in education. We're hoping that this interview can serve as an encouragement to students who have goals that seem hard to reach and even impossible, but yet they succeed. Good afternoon, Brother Evans, Dr. Evans. It's so good to have you interviewing with us today. You remember reading in our history books about Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, and the concept of separate but equal, and the challenge of the 14th Amendment. And then along in 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education, with the argument of segregation in public schools in the state of Kansas. Well, in the late 50s, where you began your education, we want to ask you, how was your experience coming from Flatonia, Texas, down in the big state? Amen. I went to undergraduate school at first before I came to Liberty. I went to Bishop College in Dallas, Texas. Amen. And we had a major challenge in the state of Texas for various reasons. But whatever, I would like to for you to share with us your experience in Texas, even as a child in the education system and as you progressed.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. Yeah, let me share with you a little bit. Of course, Flatonia is a small town located halfway between Houston and San Antonio, Texas. I always tell people if you travel Interstate 10 from Houston to San Antonio, you'd go right through Flatonia. Well, let me tell you, so we talked about the place, and let me tell you about my schooling there because I grew up there in the town. Um, I went to my elementary school years were all in a segregated setting, which means to me that I had all teachers of color and all the students were boys and girls of color. And some of the things that I think are real crucial that needs to be shared about those segregated settings, even though all aspects of them were not favorable, we had a nurturing environment. And what I mean by that was those teachers established and built personal relationships with students. It was nothing to be in Sunday school class on Sunday morning and look up and see your second grade teacher at the church in the Sunday school classroom, moving sometimes from class to class as if they're inspecting or checking upon us. That's kind of the environment that I grew up with those teachers. It was nothing for a teacher to come to your home. It wasn't necessarily that you were in trouble. They were coming by to talk about your parents. They were sharing with the parents what some of their goals were for you as individuals and some of the aspirations that they had for what they wanted to accomplish with the boys and girls. You see, I can remember the parents from the community coming together and making uniforms for the boys and girls to have a play or do things with at school. So that's what that segregated setting meant for me in the elementary school. And I'm going to say those were some positive experiences. Some of the things that I look back upon that may be considered a negative at the elementary and junior high level I still say may have gone a long ways for helping me personally to continue and not give up on education. See, I remember getting on the back of a Ford truck that was owned by Davis LaFon. Now, and he was just a parent in the community, but we got on the back of that truck and we went up to the white school where we would load these books, stacks and stacks, hundreds of books on the back of that truck. And we'd ride back down to the black school on the back of the truck with the books. And when we got to the school, and we had to take all the books off, take them to what was the book room at that time, so that because this is all getting ready for the next school year, the coming year. Some of the things that was noticed about those books that, when you open the flap of a book, especially in the state of Texas, on the spine there's a label, and it asks for the child's name, maybe even the name of the school and the year and stuff. Well, those books, when we opened them up, all of that was completely used up. There was no place for us to write our names. And some of the other things that was noticed about some of those books, we had pages that were torn out, words that had been scratched through, corners that were frailed from those books. But we were thankful to have those books. So, even though in some aspects that's a negative thing, because that goes into that, the back to the Plessy versus Ferguson, where it's separate but equal, but that didn't quite fall into the equal category. Those books of that sort. That's just, and I'm not saying it to highlight negativity, but I'm saying it that we should be conscious and aware of different experiences that boys and girls are exposed to. And see, I still hold those experiences, and here I am, way up in age now. But that's one of the things that I remember about the elementary school setting and the middle school setting.
Okay, so the setting of the elementary and the junior high school, they're pretty much the same, or were there any significant differences?
Those were pretty much the same.
Okay.
We would often, we were in this building that was known as Douglas School. That was what we call, quote, the black school. And that was the setting for boys and girls from first grade when I started. And then after I came along, it became kindergarten, basically through eighth grade. Then boys and girls at the time when I started school, if they were to continue their education in high school, they had to board a bus and travel 27 miles one way to LaGrange, which was the county seat, where they had a black high school, Randolph High School. So my siblings, they all went to Randolph High School there in LaGrange in order to continue your schooling. And so I think back, we lost some children. We lost probably some kids that could have been quite successful had they had the opportunity of a full education. But that's what was provided at the time. And I think I'm going to say this, the leaders of the community or the school system at that time, I'm going to say they assumed that they were fulfilling their obligation of separate but equal by providing that old bus that Mr. Bo Brown used to drive from Flatonia to LaGrange by way of Muldoon, Plum, and I think West Point into LaGrange, picking up students as he moved along the way. But in spite of that, we were very fortunate to, I guess, to have that opportunity and make the best of that opportunity. My freshman year in Flatonia was the first year that we integrated. The high school was actually integrated my freshman year. And that was a unique experience. I can remember the first day of school. We were all anxious. You have all the little black kids. We all kind of huddled together in one section of the auditorium. And the principal at that time was a guy by the name of R.B. Tolson. And again, I'm going to say he had the best of intentions, I think, but didn't necessarily have a good understanding for about how to mingle, how to bring people together. And so, it was part of the conversation was, uh, you, I'm gonna say it this way: y'all can't sit over there that way. You have to disperse among the building. But you don't do that to an individual. You without some training, without some way of making that a transition and a beneficial thing for everybody. So that was an experience going into high school. And of course, there are other experiences I can share with you about high school and the uniqueness of that integration process.
Okay, so the high school, in other words, you didn't have to go to Randolph High School in LaGrange. You were able to go to high school there in Flatonia. Tell me something about that experience.
Well, I will. I tell you because I grew up in the what we refer to as the black area of town, and we used to have the kids from the black area of town that lives within the city limits. We had to walk to school. The buses would pass us along the way from picking up the kids in the rural area, going to the high school and the elementary school uptown. But those of us that lived in the black community, we had to walk. And so that often consisted of groups, different groups of kids based upon who your friends were and those kinds of things. Walking to school together. And I guess it was an excellent time for socialization, conversation, and even maybe sharing information about what was going on in the classrooms. So that's one experience I can highlight. Another experience that was unique to me, and I'll say that I think it was dealing with a teacher, an English teacher, who I will say this: I think the intent was good. I think she meant well. She said, "Ray, you're a good student. You're smart, but I don't think college is for you. What I suggest that you do is consider taking air conditioning or plumbing trade, something that will provide a good living for you to have a family and stuff like that." Well, I think she meant well with that. I don't think she was doing it to I guess I'm gonna say put me down or keep me down, but I took it personally that what she meant was is that no, you can't go to college. Well, she didn't realize that my aspirations at a young age was to be an attorney. I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be the Perry Mason from Flatonia, you see? And so, but she didn't realize, but often used that conversation. It took place in the school library, at the high school library, in an old building. And I'm going to say again, I don't believe that she meant that in an ugly way or harmful way to me. But what that conversation did for me as went about my schooling, all my years of schooling, it became sort of the thing that I looked at when I kept running into challenges or hard times. I would say, people don't expect me to be able to do. They don't think I can do. And you see, it's one way to look at that because, so many people in this country that we live in think that the integrations, the voting right laws of 65 brought about equal opportunities, but there was no thought given to the 400 years that had transpired before the signing of the voting rights and all this quote civil rights legislation. And so when all of that transpired, we were supposed to be equal. And so I think back about those used textbooks. What did that do? I think the teachers that I had at the elementary using those used textbooks did an excellent job. But at the same time, it was not the current information or the most recent information. So those are some of the different aspects that I experienced in elementary through high school there. But I managed to graduate, and with the good fortune of being able to go to junior college, and where I received an AA, and then on to a historically black school where I received my bachelor's there in Texas.
So you said you wanted to be an attorney. When you went to junior high school, um, is that where you started your pre-law, or what changed you from pre-law to education? How did you make that leap?
Oh, well, when I went to the junior college, I have to share with you that it was Blinn College in Brenham, Texas, which was about 60 miles from Flatonia. Okay, I rode a school bus, and I'm going to say it was a positive thing that the college provided this bus to extend the college services into the rural areas. And so I boarded that bus like at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning and traveled that 60 miles to Brenham, Texas for 2 years. And that's where I got my associate arts degree. And of course, when you enroll in school, they ask, what's your major? What do you desire for your major? What you desire for your minor? And my desire was law at that time with a minor in history because I've always enjoyed and liked history. But that was my intent. But coming from Flatonia, and I guess I'm gonna say, and then the lack of some of experiences. One of the things that I noticed when I got into junior college was that, wow, I'm gonna have to go some extra years, you see, to get into law school. So being that I knew what my family financial situation or the sacrifices that my family was already in trying to get me through junior college, I started backing off of that thing about law, and what became the focus of, I say for myself personally, and probably other students have encountered the same thing. I started thinking, what can I do to get out of school, get a job, so I can start making money to maybe give back or support my family and myself in some way.
Okay. So, so you changed it from, did you go into education at that time?
Yes, I did. I maintained history when I went to Houston-Tillotson. I maintained history as my major. It became the major. History did, with the focus at the elementary as a support thing for elementary. And I chose that because, one, there were somewhere along the way, I heard that the opportunities for males getting jobs at the elementary levels were excellent because you didn't have many men going into the elementary departments. Most of the men were focused on coaching, mathematics, science, and those kinds of things, all at the high school level. And so I call myself looking at it from the standpoint of, I want to make sure I get a job when I finished. Mhm.
Okay, great. So what about your transition from junior high to high school and college? Like, for example, you went from high school to junior college,
Mhm.
and then you jumped to your 4-year university, which you said was Tillotson,
Houston-Tillotson.
Houston Tillotson.
Mhm.
And then what caused you to go into um, not only just elementary education, but administration?
Okay. Okay. Well, believe it or not, okay, when I went to Houston-Tillotson, started out as a history major with elementary education as a minor. You come along and you do this thing they call student teaching. And that experience really turned me on to working with kids. And I had worked with young folks before, being Sunday school teacher, superintendent of Sunday school, all those kinds of avenues. But it was not until I went into student teaching that I realized that I had an knack for working with, and I'm going to use the word inspiring, boys and girls. And I was fortunate enough to, when I did my student teaching, I did it at Oldham Elementary, and there was a black male teacher that I was assigned to. And I give that teacher, Mr. Suttles, credit for being a true inspiration for me because he challenged me. And what he challenged me on was working with boys, how to help boys and girls be successful, and not just because they failed the test, that was not the end. The only thing, failing the test only indicated what they were lacking. And as a true teacher, your job is no one should fail. You see, you should modify, adjust that instruction to help boys and girls be successful. So,
Okay. Well, you were in Texas and you started teaching in the Texas school system.
right.
What was that like as a teacher?
Well, I was fortunate because uh, um, I worked in the Austin school system. In Austin, and during the time that I came along, Austin was a highly rated or accredited school system. And I would say there was probably a lot of people that would have given their left, right, legs, arm, and everything to get a job in the school system, in the Austin school system. It was one with innovation, it was one for opportunities. And I was very fortunate I did my student teaching in the school system and was hired in that school system. Started out as a sixth grade classroom teacher, and then after a few years, I had the opportunity to work in a support role to the principal. The title of the position was, quote, helping teacher. And the focus was on boys and girls being successful because at that time, I mentioned about me going through my integration period. Well, here we're talking into the early 70s, and school systems in the state of Texas was still embarking upon integrating uh, their boys and girls in classroom settings. And at that time, they developed what they call sixth grade centers, which meant they brought boys and girls from different communities all over the city of Austin. They brought them together in schools for the sixth grade year. And that proved to be positive in some aspects, but there was some negativity to it too because you brought children together from different communities, had no idea about the conditions or the experiences, exposure that boys and girls had had from different sections of the city. And so you went from boys and girls that had lived in subsidized housing to boys and girls that came from a very, very upper middle class neighborhood. And that created some real challenges. So here we are, a group of professionals with our primary focus is to instruct boys and girls, teaching them information. And we had to spend a lot of times bringing about management and procedural kinds of things for bringing strangers together, you see? And so that experience in the sixth grade center is what moved me into the administrative direction and working with the principal Mr. Kitchens. He, I'm thankful that I had had a successful what classroom experiences working with children and stuff. And in other words, I had no problems. You were not going to act up or act inappropriately in my classroom. And I had a way of dealing with that without raising my voice and all that kind of stuff. Because I really tried to focus on what the children were bringing to the classroom and then taking and building on that. But anyway, but Mr. Kitchens, I guess, recognized that trait in me. And he's the one that wanted me to work in that position of helping teacher because we had about 1,200 boys and girls in this class, in this school. It was quite a few boys and girls. And so there were some real challenges. And so that became my dab for working in the administrative route. And then from that, I became a community education coordinator, which basically meant I planned classes and programs for boys and girls and adults, just people of the community after the school hours using a school building. So I did that for a few years, and then I got the opportunity to work as an assistant principal for maybe 2 years. I can't remember, for a few years. And then I was promoted to a principalship, and then I worked at one building 4 or 5 years, and then was moved to another building. And so I had an opportunity. Well, I guess I worked with three different buildings there, but I had an opportunity to move up in the school system. And then I moved to the role. I was selected to work as what they called a supervising principal, where I had the opportunity to supervise other principals at the elementary level. There were three of us, and we were divided. Basically, it ended up with something like 20 schools that we were responsible. Each supervising principal was responsible for, and we reported to the assistant superintendent for elementary ed. So I did that for a few years. And so with those experiences that I had gained there in Texas, then I moved to Ohio because my wife accepted a job in Ohio. And so that brought me to the great state of Ohio.
All right, Dr. Evans, thank you so much. So is your wife in the field of education?
No, she's not. My wife is in the medical field. She's not in the field of education. She's, by profession, she's what we refer to as a pulmonologist. My wife is.
Okay, a much needed profession, especially during COVID.
Yes, it is.
We continue to pray for her safety.
Thank you.
So how is the transition from the state of Texas to the state of Ohio? Are the systems pretty similar in their should I say curriculum or in their process?
What I'll say is I have to go back and I'm gonna isolate, like in Texas, the Austin school system at the time. The Austin school system was one of your more recognized, more challenging school, more progressive school systems. And some of the things that occurred within the Austin school system that allowed that to happen, we happen to have what I guess you'd use the term these days, a visionary superintendent, Dr. Ellis. And so professional development was a key. And not only that, but the latest trends in education, where we actually got into the research of that, of those trends and how we can take that information to help boys and girls be successful. What comes to mind right off the bat, and the folks in this day and time don't even know anything about it, but it was this great educator from the state of California named Madeline Hunter. And so that became a focus for how we worked on teaching, bringing about consistency, uniformity in delivering information to boys and girls. And so when you talk about transitioning from Texas to Ohio, well, when I went to Ohio, I would say, first of all, the thing that I noticed, it was a statewide thing, was the focus was on developing the personnel and stuff. And so I was a part of an urban school system in Ohio, and they had their own professional development department. So the exposure to the experts in the different fields was made available to us workers, and I worked there as a principal. So we often had opportunities with some of the key leaders in education and psychology, even in the business arena, who would come and they would do workshops or spend times with us. And so those kinds of experiences, the only thing it did is it enabled me to be a better, I think, leader for my school and stuff. So that's one of the things I'd say about the Texas and Ohio.
Okay, good. I see that you retired in Tennessee. So
Yes.
what's the difference between the two systems of Texas and Ohio and now Tennessee?
Well, I guess I had the good fortune, my wife again, she accepted a job in Tennessee. So here we come to Tennessee. And again, I was fortunate enough to get a position within the school system, the urban school system here in Tennessee. And what I just say is, I've met some great people here in Tennessee, but one of the things that I think would that I noticed was real different was the uh, emphasis or the dedication to professional development for personnel. If you happen to be working for the right superintendent or the right director, you may would have had some exposure to professional development and those kinds of things. They had some foundations that did an awful lot to support the school systems, but it was like outside groups doing it. It was not coming from within, you see. In the Austin school system, it was the Austin Independent School District that pushed professional development. When in Ohio, it was the state of Ohio that had a great emphasis upon districts developing their personnel. But I also worked for a large urban school system. That was the Columbus school system, and they had their own professional development department. So every principals meeting consisted of, I'm gonna use the term, learning something. It was like principals going to school. So we had our boys and girls come to school to work with teachers. Principals went to school with the staff development meetings to learn how to do work with the teachers and work with the boys and girls. And so when I came here to Tennessee, I had some opportunities, but I'm gonna say again, it was either through outside organizations or groups that brought about it, instead of it being through the school system. I felt like the system um, did not understand the value of having well trained, uh, ongoing training for professional staff. I think it was, I could sum it up by saying that they felt, in some respect, they felt like, well, if you've gone to college, you have your degree, you're ready to teach. And the thing about that is that's a no, because even though you have your degree, teaching is as much art and science. That it's not something that just comes automatic. You have to develop it. You have to grow it. You have to practice it. You have to, encounter. You have to dissect your delivery of information and stuff like this if you want to be successful.
So it's almost like when you're majoring in religion or philosophy or theology, you have a practicum, which
That's
means you
correct.
have to practice and you have to have on the job training and what have you. It's
Exactly.
the same in education.
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Evans, I sure thank you so much. I just have one more question and then I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
Um, Out of all of your experience in education in the three states and your time coming through the transition of the different generations of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s, what kind of advice would you give not only the departments of education across the country, but as far as the young people that are now being challenged, not with integration so much, but with their other challenges in the educational system? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think the real key is that local school systems, you have to focus on their personnel. And what I kind of just finished that other part by stating, simply because you hire someone with a degree doesn't necessarily mean you've hired a person who can do a good job for you. And you need to know that up front. You don't want to discover that. And so what I mean by that is that you ought to have in place good, solid professional development for your staff, and you should want that ongoing. That needs to be an ongoing thing, you see, because to me that is the true measure of a teacher growing is a teacher that aspires and have a desire to want to get additional training, learn different techniques, and those kinds of things. So I think that's real important. The other thing I'd encourage the school systems to focus on is making sure that you have adequate resources for the schools. And what I mean by that is that boys and girls come to school with from many various backgrounds. And some of those backgrounds are not the ones we actually want them to come with, but we have to still take that child. And what our focuses ought to be on is how we're going to develop this child. And so you may need additional resources just based upon who you're working with. And that should not be looked upon as a negative. You see? What you want is for children to be successful. And I think often children get labeled, maybe I'm using the word for acting out, because we don't have a full understanding for why the child is acting out. And that's why you need that additional resources like counselors, nurses, social workers, school psychologists available. And some schools need full-time extra resources for the boys and girls. So that's what I'd say to a local school system is focus on training your personnel and making sure that they are well trained. And I'd say a good indicator, if you find personnel that don't desire training and want to do better, then that's a good picture right there. That's not who you need in your system. So that's one thing I'd say. And then the second one is work on mustering and garnishing resources to support your students. Not necessarily the teachers. You support the teachers by providing those resources too, but the goal is supporting boys and girls to be successful.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Evans. It was great speaking with you, and we wish you well in your retirement. And I understand you exemplify good parenting. Your daughter is now aspiring to be an attorney. She's now in college, and
Yes.
we pray for her success as well.
Thank you.
Amen. So you have a very blessed day, and give your family our regards.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much.